Welcome to Base Layers.
Welcome to Base Layers. I wrote a tagline. It's this is Base Layers, a show where we discuss the niche within a niche that is the intersection of 3D printing and Bitcoin. Other than that,
Wonderful.
the show is painfully unscripted, and that will be apparent as you listen to us talk. But it's been a minute since the last time we recorded, so I'm excited to join my co-host Printer and talk about what we talk about.
Yeah, right. It has been a while, so very happy to be here again.
And you are appearing this time without the Cthulhu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, mask.
Without the
sharing
full
a
face
little
mask.
bit more. Which I'm excited to get a little bit more of a read on your facial expressions this time.
I'll try to be as expressive as possible. Yeah, I just die with the Cthulhu mask on, actually.
Oh,
it's too hot.
I was surprised you made it that long. So one thing that you had mentioned before we hit record to talk about was since the last time we have recorded, the BitX Legion has struck a block. I think it's been just one.
Yeah.
But they did get a block that was, as we were talking about during the Nashville conference, that this happened.
Yeah, it was really obviously very unexpected, and yeah, the whole open source miner Discord went absolutely nuts and bonkers. There was an emergency meeting where everyone was screaming and celebrating, and people were talking over each other, and we were waiting for Scott for about, I think, 1.5 hours. No one knew when we knew he was talking at the conference, and we asked ourselves when or if he would come, but he didn't. And later I found out he was actually with you, or you were with him.
I don't know if he was. He might have actually. So him and I, we got to talk for a little bit at Bitcoin Park on the same day that it happened, but neither of us were aware that either it was happening or had happened or whatever. So it was neat to be talking to him like on that day, but he was unawares for some period of time until he checked his phone.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, no one expected it.
Yeah, I don't know
if it's crazy to think about. I was a bit skeptical at first, and then checked the block template, checked the data on CK pool, checked everything, and yeah, it must have been someone with at least 2 or 3 bit access mining, judging from the sessions and from the hash rate.
So do you? You know way more about this than me. So CK pool is, for people who don't know, and I'm included in this. CK pool is a pool that is specially run to accommodate BitX owners. Is that accurate?
Not really. No, that's public pool.
Not really. Oh, okay.
But CK pool is, I mean, in some way, yes, because CK pool, or at least the solo version, so ckpool.solo.com, I think is the URL, is a solo pool where you can point your miners at, and they will try to solve the block on their own. So there is no per share payout, per hash rate payout. There is zero payout unless you find a block. And in the case of CK pool takes 2% commission for the service and for the noding and proxying and whatever they're doing. And yeah, the rest goes to the miner, to the lucky one. That's why most people, or I think many people with BitAccess, prefer public pool, because there's zero fee, absolutely.
Right.
But yeah, the block was found on CK pool.
Can you explain, if you know, how first, is it possible to determine how much BitX hash there is out there? And then second, like how do they do that? I don't even know.
I don't think it is. I mean, it's possible to aggregate data, because if we just let me just before I'm talking out of my ass, I'll just open
But
public
there's
pool
no,
for
I
a
guess
second.
they're not phoning home or anything and saying like, I'm a
No,
BitX and
no,
I'm,
no. Of
yeah.
course not. Essentially just a PCB with an ESP32 and one ASIC chip that is constantly hashing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really everything. But if we take a look at public pool IO, the web front end of public pool right now, so web.public-pool.io, they are currently hashing 2,605 bit access on this pool or in this pool.
And public pool is, I know there's like, I guess that is the default pool that the software steers people towards, though of course they have the
Yes,
freedom to choose any pool that they want.
exactly. And that's the point. There are people who are solo mining. There are people who are doing regular mining with their bit access, especially with Brains or with Ocean. I think it's worth because they do lightning payouts, so you actually get the small amount of sets. And then there's people
So
on CK Pool. I run my own public pool by now. So there's also a pool on pool.gober.me with a few bit access running. And so, no, we can't effectively determine the hash rate because all those bit access are just shown there because they have the worker name bitx next to their address.
I don't think anybody would be like would have a motivation to do it, but somebody could obviously spoof the name BitX and be using a different miner, though that device's hash rate would probably be substantially higher and it would be a red flag, but there's probably not even a motivation for that sort of stuff to be happening.
I mean, you could regulate or undervolt NS9 or whatever and put BitX in his name and make everyone believe you have a 2 terahash BitX or something like that. But why? It doesn't make sense. Right. Because in the end, the chips are the same, that are doing the same hashes. It doesn't make sense.
So given the estimated amount of BitXs that exist and are mining on the network right now, is it known, or do you know approximately how frequently, if with the current hash rate, how often should we expect a BitX to be hitting a block? If there's variance, I get that, but what's the ballpark on average?
My brain is failing me. I know someone on Twitter has done the math on exactly that, and there's a website where you can look it up, but I don't know. What it is. I think based on the data we have now and based on the blog that was already found, it should be sometime around November, December this year, or could be.
So it's maybe a couple times a year, once or twice a year at the current hash rate. I'm sure it's growing.
And I think even those are big maybes.
Yeah, I am personally eager to offer some kind of mining product in my online store, but the BitX still kind of feels like a proof of concept / lottery miner, and I was kind of waiting for a different design that was still something that was appropriately scaled for, an American standard electrical service, but that had a little more power to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. How much hash rate are you looking for?
I don't even. I'm not even smart enough to. I should say educated enough about Bitcoin mining to say. So if one BitX is, I think 2 terahashes is what you said. That's what.
No, absolutely not. That's absolutely astronomical right now. So the BitX Supra does a regular hash rate of about 700 gigahash.
And that's with one ASIC chip on it, right?
Yeah, and when you start it up for the first minute, maybe it's about 1 terahash.
Oh, is it kind of spins up and regulates itself? So 700 gigahashes, and I don't know. I'm admittedly not educated about electricity, so basically something that I could take and plug into a standard American 110 volt, I think that's what it is, outlet, and that it might make a little bit of a noticeable impact on my monthly electric bill, but it wouldn't be generating an amount of heat that was unmanageable in the summertime, but that would, because with a BitX today, you mentioned that some people are taking payouts via Lightning and stuff like that. It's bringing in a nominal amount of sats. I'd rather run something that was had a more significant chance of hitting a block, be that as a solo miner or especially as, in some sort of limited pool setting, where I think there's a sweet spot to be reached where you're not getting 4 sats a day, but your odds of hitting a block are not like now and between the heat death of the universe kind of a thing. Like I think there's a sweet spot of risk.
But there's the thing. At the current hash rate, to really have a device or have an amount of devices that would actually increase your chance of finding a solo block, I think, I'm not sure about that. I don't have any actual numbers, but I think to realistically up that chance for about even 1%, you'll need to invest, 40 to 50K in equipment at
but
current hash rates.
For me, there's a sweet spot of like, let's say hypothetically, like I have a group of Bitcoin friends or in the SeedSigner Telegram chat or something, and we all want to band together. And let's say we had not the current BitX, but say something that is 10 times more powerful that I can plug into a standard outlet, isn't going to put off a crazy amount of heat, and that I'm willing to mine with that thing and have it plugged in a selfless mining kind of way to where it's to support the network. And if I never receive a single sat and payout from that, I'm okay with it. Let's say there are a bunch of us that are willing to do that. And so we might have a chance at a block once every 15 years or something like that. And we obviously, if we're mining together, we're not going to get the full Bitcoin, the full subsidy award. We'll have to split it between ourselves. For me, there's some sort of sweet spot that's between like I get 3 sats a day and I never have a chance at getting a block ever. Maybe there are some lessons from fiat lottery, in terms of do more people play Powerball or do more people do scratch off tickets where there's like more of a chance of winning, but the jackpot is significantly less. I don't know. I am sure that I'm not personally incentivized at the scale of the Supra.
Yeah, I understand. So the BitX Hex is coming now. If you are already built, that's the same thing with 6 of the ASIC chips. And I expect something with 10 or 12 will surface at some point. I don't know. The question is, how long does it make sense? Because at some point you just back to a hashboard of a regular miner.
Yeah. Now, like most of the miners are designed for, use in industrial facilities that have access to, 220 circuits and yada, yada, yada. So I think getting a mining package that is more convenient to like consumer electronics is definitely important. But and it's something I've talked a little bit with Scott about. For me, the exciting thing about BitX and the open source mining movement is all of this research and information being publicly available, which vastly diminishes the amount of R&D that has to go into, say, a water heater that recuperates heat from the mining process to be able to provide a home with hot water or whatever. Like that is the super exciting thing for me about the open source mining movement, is that it hopefully is going to bring us a step closer to miners being used in other, industrial or, home scale devices that can capture the heat and use it for other novel purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And also the general goal of open sourcing Bitcoin mining, because it's awfully closed. I mean, everything that Bitmain and Whatsminer are doing is just behind closed doors. We have no idea what's running on there. I mean, we have sort of an idea. You can sniff and all that stuff, but you can't really know every line of code in there. And that's, given that Bitcoin itself is an open source project, a big problem that I think this movement is going to solve at some point.
And I was running an S9 several years ago, and I think it was called ASIC Boost was revealed that Bitmain was running, and that highlights what you're talking about, and that
exactly.
We would ideally want a lot of this to be much more above board and transparent for people. Yeah.
So, anything else happened in the last days that you want to talk about?
So we talked a little bit about the Dark Skippy disclosure has occurred since the last time you and I recorded, and that's been an interesting chapter in SeedSigner. I will just say, for anyone who's listening to this, that it doesn't represent any sort of existential threat to SeedSigner, but just illustrates one of multiple different kinds of attacks that users will expose them to if they fail to ensure that they're running code that has been released and endorsed by our project. Just as I don't know if it's possible to run unsigned code on a Trezor, if it's a DIY Trezor, I guess it is. But I don't know if it's possible to run unsigned software on any of the other hardware wallets. But if it is, everything that creates Bitcoin transaction signatures is vulnerable to a Dark Skippy style attack. It was just illustrated on SeedSigner because we are open source and it's nominally simple to load arbitrary code on the device, and so that's why they said they selected it for their illustrative purposes. But it's unfortunate that people just see a video on Twitter as they're scrolling and they see a SeedSigner doing something that is, really dangerous, and they now associate SeedSigner with some sort of lack of security or some sort of malicious software exploit. And that's just something that we have to work to educate people on, and it is what it is.
Yeah. So, for one, I don't think it does. I really don't think that people are thinking that SeedSigner is in some way vulnerable or more vulnerable than it was before the ridiculous bunny. And the other thing is, because you mentioned that you don't know if Trezors or other hardware wallets can run unsigned software. I don't know myself about the Trezor. I know that a certain cold card or closed card won't do it because NVK is bragging about it nonstop. But the thing is, with Dark Skippy, and I was talking to another Bitcoin dev about this for, I think, an hour, something like that, and he went absolutely mad because he said it's absolutely ridiculous to think that this is the biggest danger is about SeedSigner here, because if someone is going to reliably try a nonce exfiltration attack, this is going to start in the supply chain of any hardware. This can start in the supply chain of any hardware wallet manufacturer. That's the more dangerous thing to me, and that would be my main concern, because you only need one broken link, one unhappy employee in a factory who somehow has access to, whatever the secure elements, the firmware signing, something that's
and
doing
it's
the
not something that,
or checking that.
Yeah, it's not something that has to be deployed, as a hardware device. It can be deployed as a software update. So as you allude, it just takes someone who has access to the signing key for firmware release that can, slip in something undesirable, and that's we always talk about with SeedSigner versus commercial hardware wallets that it's trade-offs, and what the wallet companies tend not to emphasize is the amount of trust that you're putting into the signed releases that they come out with periodically that fix bugs and introduce new features or different optimizations. With SeedSigner, it's with either a SeedSigner or a cold card or whatever other device, like it's important that the software that's running on the device is what the user intends to run. It's just that with a cold card, that's accomplished through an internal mechanism that's hardwired into the device. And with a SeedSigner, that's accomplished after you've downloaded the software and you use an independent tool like SHASUM, which is a terminal command line tool, to verify the download, and that's what you deploy to the micro SD card and what you end up running on your SeedSigner. It's the exact same process of verifying that the binary, matches a certain hash, and it is what it is. It's just SeedSigners. Users should understand that they're responsible to do that manually, whereas the hardware wallet, you're trusting them to have implemented that correctly and to be releasing, code that you want to run.
Yeah, but most of us SeedSigner users are doing that already because we don't trust the hardware wallet makers in the first place. That's why we're here. That's why we SeedSigner users. So.
That's what we showed up for.
Exactly. So that was a big nothing burger, essentially. A dangerous nothing burger. Nonetheless, I don't want to downplay the vulnerability itself. It's good when vulnerabilities are found, so people can prepare, but it's not something I would worry about.
And if something, it's
I would
an
certainly
opportunity,
not, because I built my own image. But yeah,
it's an opportunity for us to emphasize the importance of verifying software to users. That's definitely an opportunity that's worth taking. But I also appreciate you pointing out that if someone was in earnest about deploying this attack at scale, a hardware wallet manufacturer is definitely a much sweeter, bigger honeypot than the amount of SeedSigner users that is, a much smaller proportion of people doing cold storage. Definitely a population of people who are more probably likely to be using multi-sig and have a mix of devices that wouldn't end up being compromised anyway through that kind of attack. And probably a more technical and more security savvy group of users who are going to be more diligent about the software they're running. So, anyhow, that's that.
Right.
So we've probably talked more than we usually do in our preamble to the design portion of the show. So I guess unless you have something else, we should move on.
No, we'll move on to Fusion 360 now in a minute, because first I want to show you in reality, you and our viewers, what this will be about. I'm sure some have already seen it somewhere. Is that the wrong way around?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And so tell me, tell us what is novel and optimized about the enclosure that you're showing.
Yeah, if you have seen this before, it's because I didn't make the base design of that. That was Geometric, or I think BTC Design was his Twitter handle. He made a similar design, not this one, and unfortunately vanished before it was, before it had reached the absolute finish line. It was usable, but not perfectly usable. There were a lot of kinks, a lot of things that didn't work well, especially the joystick portion was a bit messy to print. And yeah, I back then, I think it's 2 years ago now, I tried to fix that with him, but our contacts were always a bit choppy because he was working when I wasn't and the other way around. And yeah, then he was gone. And I don't know, a few months ago, a bug bit me that told me I should revisit this design and just try to re-engineer it with all my newfound skills in Fusion that I didn't have back then. I mean, I had some, but I got better, so I thought maybe take another stab at it. And yeah, that's the actual V2 right now. It's working fairly.
The styling is fun, and the way the thumbstick is set up is it's a different aesthetic, and it is cool looking in layman's terms. But I would also point out that Geometric is a commercial designer.
Yeah, he's a pro.
Yeah, I first interacted with him early on when he'd thrown that design out there, and it may also not be known by people that he designed the Spectre Shield enclosure that was commercially produced in a small batch. And
I thought that was you.
So there are two designs. So there was a design that he created that they intended to be manufactured in, I'm not sure if it was aluminum, it was some kind of metal, and they were selling that for a time to like enterprise and power users. But his design, that design was optimized for production with metal, and was sort of difficult to produce through a 3D printing process. So there's a different design that I made that is not nearly as pretty, but it does print better. But he's definitely a pro and somebody who has a great aesthetic sense for design.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I made a mistake before. This is the version 1. This is version 2. It just has a D on the display because the Waveshare board is actually broken. That's my way to mark defective board.
No, it's a really sharp design.
Put it in there. Yeah, what did I do with that? I tried to reverse engineer it, and at some point I posted a pic about it on Twitter, and I think also in the SeedSigner Telegram group, and asked which way we should go. So, because Geometric's design had the screws in here from up top, and had threaded inserts down in the bottom, or captive hex nuts, and yeah, getting the inserts in was a bit messy. It's still messy now, but the poll result was that 99% said hide the screws in the bottom. So I tried to do that, and it works. It does work perfectly, and I don't think this will become any new SeedSigner standard. So the other 3D printed enclosures are just too good for that. But it looks cool, and maybe we can make it.
And it's another option.
It's different, yeah, and I think maybe we can even make a slim version with the short pins, like in the Premium, at some point.
Right. So, and I was at first I was skeptical of the slimmer versions because they require a different soldering process that some people may not be. Some people may not want to attempt. But the slimness of the slim versions, it really does make for a nice device. The way it feels in your hands and the proportions are different. So it's just different strokes for different folks. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Go on if you want. I'm just preparing here. I'll just have to mention, because I imported these two STL files. This was all I had. Can you see that? So can you see my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Because I imported those two at the beginning in this design, in the reference, and because they have, I already decimated the mesh, so it has less polygons, but it still has about 80,000 per model, and this is just too much for Fusion, so we can't step through every single step like usual, because otherwise Fusion would crash and we won't have a good time. But I can show you and our viewers what I did, just not in detail.
I know that, and this is something interesting to talk about for people who may be less familiar with. Fusion will let you import an STL file, but because
Yeah,
it doesn't have the underlying design, geometric design, it basically renders it, as you allude, in many, many, many triangles.
yeah, because it
And
is
they're
many triangles.
right, right. Hence is the nature. But Fusion has, if you are paying for a premium version of Fusion, I believe they have some automated tools that can take an STL and break it down as much as possible into a shape or a model that eliminates as many of those triangles as possible. And there are some ways that you can do it manually too. Did you do any of that
Yeah,
after you imported the STL file?
yeah. I can show you what I did. So you have to go into the mesh workspace here,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see this is already a body. If it was still an STL file or like a mesh, then it
Mm-hmm.
would be this orange or yellow mesh icon here to the left. And if you have an STL in here, you can just select it and use one of those options like, what is it? Remesh in English.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time when you remesh it, you also can reduce the mesh. You can choose the amount of triangles. You can choose the max length of some triangle lines and stuff like that. You can play around with the values until they become less. But the thing is, the moment you have rounded or somehow not straight geometry, you just need loads of them to accommodate for that. And this is the absolute lowest I could go
Mm-hmm.
without or with retaining the shape or without losing the shape. And then you
Right.
can mark it and go on convert to body. And then depending on the poly count, it will take between, I don't know, 20 seconds and 20 minutes. 20 minutes is extreme, but I've been there. And then it will convert it to a body, but don't expect it to be a parametric body where you can just go on and click on the face and do something with it, because
Right.
that's not the case. So I didn't draw off of that. I just really used it as a kind of visual reference to see where is what, and then
What
went from there.
what kind of system are you running Fusion on? Is it a beefy system at all, or is it more like a standard computer?
It was a beefy system when I built it in 220.
Uh-huh.
Now it's probably a bit over standard computer. So this is running an i7-9700K, I think is the processor, the correct term, and the GTX 3070, which was very expensive at the time. I think I bought
Right.
it for
Right.
600 euros or something like that. And yeah, it's a beast of a graphics card, but it's also generating a lot of heat.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
And
run
I think
Fusion
32
usually
gig
on
RAM
a.
and sorry,
Oh yeah.
the Fusion is still struggling. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You can't satisfy Fusion's need for Fusion's power hungriness. It's like crazy.
Yeah. I run Fusion on a Mac, and so Macs and Fusion don't seem to play together as well as they could. So I never really know if I never really know if the hardware is being used fully or if there are hiccups. I don't know whether that's for a lack of hardware or if that's some sort of issue with just between Fusion and Mac OS not playing well with each other. It definitely works well enough. I do a lot of design work, but
Okay.
the experience probably could be a lot smoother on a PC.
Oh, you'll have to stream once the design process for half an hour so I can spy and take a look. Maybe we're experiencing the exact same thing. I'm curious. I never tried on the Mac, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what I did was just trying to replace, or not replace, trying to make something that retains the same shape and especially the aesthetics of geometrics design, while also improving on some things. Because, like this joystick, we both know it, we had it printed. Sometimes it printed beautifully and worked absolutely well, and then you think you'll print 10 of them, and then one works well from the same print plate, and the other 9 are just not usable because the geometry was just so delicate and the printer was just, I don't know.
Now, do you attribute that to variance in, like, very minor variance in the placement of the thumbstick on the waveshare head that goes underneath that, or do you think there's another factor at play?
Could be, but I really think it's neither the waveshare nor the design's fault, but it's just the inherent, how do I say that? The inherent inexactness, if that's a word, of 3D printing in general. I mean, 3D printing is, of course, an exact science in the sense that we can, say, print a 20 by 20 cube and we get a 20 by 20 cube more or less. But we all know that small blobs can happen and things like that. Just small blobs and bits of plastic which are catching somewhere. And this is a very delicate design with these rounded cutouts that are also lofted above that need to be printed on support or in midair. And when the printer goes around here and then here and has to stop and go to the other one, there's just so much that can go wrong. And I've just found that most of the time, and with here or here, something caught, some blob of plastic caught inside of there from the supports or something like that. And that unfortunately broke the whole motion. Or just made it so, I don't know, unsatisfying that it just wasn't fun. When it worked, it was glorious, really. But it didn't often enough.
And for people who are maybe less familiar, there are limits to the amount of overhang that an FDM 3D printer can tolerate. And depending on the printer and depending on, a lot of it actually depends on the slicing software that is used with the printer, that they can tolerate a more dramatic overhang. And if it gets to the threshold of an overhang that the printer just can't build cleanly, a lot of times we will enable what's called support in a print. And what that means is that the printer, in addition to generating the model that you're trying to create, it generates or lays down plastic material that is designed to be a temporary support. That's where the name comes from, but a temporary support that allows these areas where there's too dramatic of an overhang for a freestanding model, it creates a support surface that portions of the final product can be laid out on. But anyone who's used support has had the experience of the layer of plastic that is laid down on top of the supports just isn't as clean as the layer of plastic that would be laid down, on a print bed, or that might be built independently as a part of the model. There's a certain amount of adhesion between the support material and the finished product model that has to be broken away. And unless you do some sort of post-processing where you clean it up with a file or by melting it somehow, you're just never going to get as fine of details or as clean of a rendering. You feel like that's an accurate characterization?
Absolutely. Supports are great in theory, like you said. They sound absolutely great, but then in reality, it's just most of the time an annoyance. And that's why try.
Which is why most people who design for 3D printing process, whenever they feasibly can, they try to avoid the need for supports in their design.
Exactly. Yeah. Back to this faceplate. When I started, I still thought I'll put the screws in from the top. So, like you can see, I cannot very accurately select steps here, but just made some chamfers and fillets to make it look nice, made a button design that resembled, I think, a rendering Geometric did back then of an alternative faceplate he imagined, where he had slightly similar buttons, not exactly, but similar. And I really liked those, and that picture never left my head. So this is my version of them. I also tried to design this plate so it can print it flat on the bottom, on its bottom. And here's some
buttons
overhang.
Uniform heights, or is there a height difference between them?
Here they still have a uniform height.
Okay.
And here's some bridging going on to accommodate the buttons of the waveshare display. And my joystick design wasn't very well thought out at this point. So where are we? I made a pyramid-like shape. And back then I thought I would try to make this offset here and print the joystick in place. And I thought I could play enough with the tolerances to make it move freely, which obviously didn't work in hindsight.
Yeah, it's a tricky problem.
Absolutely. So even more tricky if I can't select anything here. Just a second. So then I changed that, and I mean I kept the pyramid-like shape, but I opted for a cutout which is just a bit tapered to the top, so it catches the joystick and holds it. And then made some features for gripping it easier.
Yeah.
And then, as you can see, I started with a very crude representation of the original case shape. Which eventually went to this.
I remember seeing the in the test model that Geometric sent me. I remember seeing that kind of chamfering around the USB port. And thinking that was just such a simple but elegant thing that I, as a designer, wouldn't have thought to have done.
I thought that myself.
It's just a nice touch.
I made it here, and when I made the sketch, I remember I thought it's as easy as it is genius. So you just make an offset of the shape of the base shape of the cutout, pull it out as far as you want, as far as you like it. Then extrude, cut a bit of that out, and fillet the shapes, or fillet the edges, and boom, you're done. And you're almost guaranteed to have something that looks good.
And it's a touch that makes it look like more professionally designed, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, really.
It's just,
That was one of these, why hadn't I thought of that before moments?
Right.
But I love those, actually, because then you remember it forever.
Right.
So, and then I think in the meantime, I already posted a first screenshot of this and got what I deserved, I would say. A comment from Keith Mukai. Thanks for that. Who told me
Keith can be brutally honest.
But I love his brutal honesty. Honestly, I'd much rather have someone tell me when I'm in the mid of the design process, hey, what you're doing is shit. Stop it or do it differently because this won't work or this won't work well or whatever. I mean, he was wrong with that. It works, but obviously he doesn't like it because I think he's a D-pad maximalist, and I understand that. I love D-pads as well, and yeah. So then I thought, how can I make a similar joystick that works inside of this? Because this is obviously not qualified for a D-pad,
Right.
because just can't make it work when you have to catch the D-pad below the faceplate and you have to sit it on top of the joystick that almost sticks out of here. Because when we look, here is the cutout for the wave-share joystick. So this is 3 millimeters above, or 2.5 millimeters above the top surface of the faceplate. So this can't work with the D-pad, unfortunately, with this design. And then I made this thing. And yeah, Keith said, Keith called it the Eiffel Tower.
Like the midget
And
Eiffel Tower.
I agree now. It has a bit of resemblance, maybe. So I don't know if you can see that now because I don't see what I'm filming, but yeah, that's this thing in here, and
Sure.
it actually it's a bit loose still. I will play with the outer opening a bit until it sits a bit more reliably in there, but it actually works really well, and it's just PLA. That was also one of the design goals, to not need TPU.
Do you do anything special with the shaping or the dimensions of the opening on the bottom of the thumbstick where the wave-share head fits in? Do you do any kind of wedging effect where the hole might narrow as it grows taller, or any sort of other rounding the corners, or any of this kind of stuff that might make it fit better?
I did that on the thumbsticks for the Rock Pill and for the Orange Pill Mini, the TPU ones. Yes, there I tapered the extrusion that goes up a bit to catch the joystick better. On this one, it wasn't possible, or it would be a hindrance, I think, because the metal part of the joystick sticks out so high that I just made similarly angled walls to go with it, to just kind of rub over it, if that's the correct term.
Yeah.
So
in retrospect, the parts for SeedSigner that were initially suggested to be my Michael Flaxman, the Raspberry Pi Zero 1.3 was a stroke of genius, but the wave-share hat has gotten a lot of Lindy effect, but there's probably display hats that would have been easier to have worked with over time.
Yeah, probably, or maybe, but we'll see. Yeah. Maybe something better comes around at some point. So at this point, I had the pole out, and people said hide the screws in the bottom, and I foolishly thought, yeah, easy, let's do that. Yeah, it wasn't easy. Absolutely wasn't easy, but yeah. Here are the openings with the countersunk holes. This works well with 20 or 22 millimeter M2 screw, M2.5 screws. So. And then I'll just did a bunch of minor edits to the buttons, because they looked good in Fusion, but sometimes when things are so delicate, they look good in Fusion and you print them and they look like shit, or they don't work right. So I reworked all of this a bit, and then also added a bit of a height difference for the middle one. And this is where we're at now. Then I had just to do a few test prints, as we always do, and discover some things that wouldn't work. And now we come to the more or less problem with this design. So you can't just screw into the plastic.
Right.
I mean, you can. Right. Generally, you can screw into plastic, but you'll need 2 or 3 or 4 millimeters. So the screw can...
And you have to size the hole like very... Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've got the sizing down by now, but and I really tried to make it work there, but it doesn't because this is just not enough space for a screw to bite.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
This 1.8 millimeters here.
Right.
So yeah, we have two options now: threaded inserts, which I'm showing into the camera now,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously hex nuts.
And threaded inserts for people who aren't familiar with that process.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but a threaded insert is a little. It's basically like a nut, a standard nut, but it has kind of fins that extend out in all directions. And the way it's intended to be installed is you usually attach it to a soldering iron that heats the whole insert. Yeah, you probably can come up with a picture or a video that will illustrate this much better. But you heat up the whole insert and then you melt it into the plastic. I'll let you.
Yeah, exactly. You already said what it does. So it's this threaded insert. So in my case, a 3 millimeter short insert, because otherwise that couldn't work. So this is not the standard size. The standard size is 5 millimeter height.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, these are by CNC Kitchen, which supposedly makes very high quality, but really those things are just a brass ring with a thread inside and some toothing out there that should melt into the plastic. We'll take a tip of a soldering iron and set it to something that won't burn PLA, but will melt it, like, I don't know, 100 degrees or 80. Don't go much higher. And then you press it in. There are specialized tips you can buy to screw it on and perfectly put them in, but honestly, you can do it with any tip, with any soldering tip, and it just takes a few minutes. The only problem is, of course, we don't have a lot of material here, so, and we have the other problem. I modeled the wave share, or a crude wave share display, so we can, I can highlight what's the thing here. The wave share display is built like this. So here's the PCB, and on it is the actual display. And the display is offset of this face of the PCB where also the screw holes are, or should be. I was too lazy to model those. And here's the thing. The threaded inserts also act as the spacers here. So when you melt them in, they have to stick out about 1 millimeter. I think it's 1 millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
0.5. Yeah. They have to stick out a bit.
And that's just so that they don't pierce the other side or deform the plastic on the other side, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. If you look closely, so I'll just stop the screen sharing for a moment, or not for a moment, because we're fairly done here. I don't know if you can see. Can you see it in the corners?
I think in the final publication of this, it's your feed is a little pixelated for me, so I can't see it. But I'll bet you in the final version it'll be visible.
Yeah, I can see it now in my camera picture fairly well. When you go a bit too far, or when you have them molten inside of this sufficiently to stay in there, you will see small markings on the top of the faceplate, which is less than ideal, to say the least. The other option is we'll just take hex nuts. Here, the thing is we'll have to glue them in because there is just not enough room to really embed them in the print.
Do you have to use low-profile hex nuts or just standard depth?
No, these are just absolute standard hex nuts.
Okay.
They are still standing out a bit, so I could probably model some geometry around it so that they are flush. That's what I aim to do for the next version. But right now, this is where the design is at, and I'm very interested in your opinion about this.
No, the glue
what we could do to make it better.
You know, the glue is a really. I'm for some reason always obsessed with the nuts being captured in the design, but super glue is a really good, extremely simple alternative that will hold them in place as much as they need to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone has it at home. It's definitely easier than threaded inserts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
Um,
should work the same.
do you have a preferred kind of glue that you use when you try to affix things to 3D printed models?
Yeah, lots of them. It really depends on the application. So
Oh,
not
okay.
not every glue is suitable for everything. I love the Loctite gel, so the bit thicker Loctite super glue is one of the absolute best super glues around.
Yeah.
I
The nice
have
thing about that one too is
affixed my
that you
fingers
can.
to my workbench a couple times with it. I know it's really strong. Yeah. One thing to do when you're working with 3D prints and super glue, the absolute pro tip is while you're gluing, blast the fan at it
Oh,
on as
interesting.
high
What
power.
does that
Big,
accomplish
big,
or improve?
it does prevent the white hazing part. You ever
Oh,
noticed when you put a drop of super glue on some PLA and it dries, you'll have a white circle of haze
now that you mention
around
it, yeah.
it, and that's from some chemical reaction from the superglue with the PLA or with whatever material. And
Hmm.
this is actually from fumes. So if you blast a fan at it, it will disperse the fumes, and you won't get the haze, which for
Huh.
aesthetic prints can be very helpful to know.
Yeah. No, that's a good tip.
Yeah, and for other things or for more critical things, I have a two-part epoxy, one that is quick setting and a big canister of the not quick setting one. So depending on what I'm gluing,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll use
The
those.
nice thing about the Loctite gel is that you can generally keep using with a lot of super glues. Like it's almost like they're one and done. Like the first time you use it,
Hmm.
if you don't use it all, you might as well throw it away because you can't use it anymore. But Loctite, their dispensing mechanism keeps the glue from drying out, so you can use the same, the same Loctite uh, product for quite a while, I've found.
Yeah, I've used those for weeks. Really, you just have to remember to close them, but
Yeah.
otherwise they work really well. And yeah, what's to be said about it? It's gel, so it's thick. It's not the cheapo super glue that you open and you touch the tube and it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
We hate that. Yeah. Any opinions on this design by you?
I am excited to print one and get hands on because for me that's the ultimate, usability test is
Yes,
the
sure.
proof of the pudding.
That's
But
why
I
I
like
did.
the aesthetics. I like the aesthetics for sure. The modified version of the thumbstick. It seems like it's a promising approach.
That's very nice of you, but I'm missing the critical points.
Would it? I'm sorry. Which part?
So usually when I hit you with the design, I mean we've done that a few times by now. So I show you a design, and usually there are going to be at least 1 or 2 points, nagging points that you'll have,
Oh wow.
and that's
I think what
don't get me wrong.
you're getting
That's
at
a
is
good
I.
thing. That's constructive criticism. So that's what I wanted to say.
No, so okay. So if you press me to be a little more critical, um,
Yeah.
I am not bullish on the use of non-printed, the required use of non-printed components in an enclosure. I think
Yes.
if it can, the enclosures that both you and I have created that can be snapped together and don't require screws or risers or anything like that.
For a
To
reason,
me, that
yes.
is, yeah, that's always felt like a leap forward to me. So sometimes anything that requires, additional hardware is sometimes it feels like a step backwards. If I'm going to be the stickler critical person, but here I'm trying to be positive. I wasn't going to bring that up.
That's nice, but you can believe me. It annoys me to no end myself, because I mean I didn't spend the better part of 1 year of getting the rock pill right to then need screws and spacers again. Yeah, there were many times when I was sitting there on this design and working on it in Fusion in the evening, and then just looked at it and, you need screws. Go fuck yourself. It's just, I mean, it's a 2-year-old design, okay. But it looks nice, so. And I don't know, I just want to make it work. I don't want it to be forgotten. Maybe we can, I don't know, achieve something. Because on the other hand, the premium enclosures require a lot of hardware and custom too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the end result is worth it. So, yeah, we'll see. Not sure if that's an argument for a printed case, but yeah.
Definitely for the metal enclosures. Yeah, the parts are absolutely necessary. One thing I will note is that your pronunciation of the word, so I'm going to betray it, but the word rugged.
Rugged. Is that the correct pronunciation?
So that it's super funny.
Thank you for teaching me.
But the way that you're saying it, it sounds like rugged, as in like the verb form of somebody being rugged, like rug pulled.
Rug pulled.
And so you left me wondering, like, what I thought was the rugged pill, was that actually the rugged pill?
No, I mean, for me, as a German native speaker, this is the same word. Because they are written with the exact same letters.
Oh, okay.
So I would really...
thinking like...
Today I learned that there are two different... I mean, I know there are two different interpretations of this word.
Yeah.
But I never knew that there are two actual vocal versions of the word. Two ways to pronounce it. I heard that the first time, and I always called it the rug pill. So, yeah, thanks for teaching me that. Maybe
I
that's
just
why
didn't know if there was
looking
something
at me
inherent in the design that like people were going to get rugged if they use it. Because anyhow,
absolutely not.
Cool. That's funny. That's funny, and that's one of those things that's one of those things that we honestly just discover by verbally interacting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Huh. Cool.
Yeah. So much for this.
Is there any other criticism that I can offer? If
yeah.
if you have a need or a yearning for it,
yeah, please do. If you have criticism, hit me.
No. That's funny though. The part about
I've come to an age where I really appreciate honest criticism, because if you get honest criticism from someone, you know he's not a childish person.
Yeah. No, I actually just posted a reply on Nostr this morning about someone who was asking about the proper way to give developers feedback. And I'm sure there's multiple ways that you can do that, but I just pointed out that the best developers that I've worked with in any capacity get excited when you make them aware of a flaw or a bug or some sort of suboptimal thing in the code that they've produced. Like, they actually get excited about figuring out how to fix it. And a lot of people, when they ask for feedback, this is something I go back and forth with my kids on, because they'll ask me about a school assignment, or they'll ask me to proofread an essay or something like that. And when a lot of people ask for feedback, they're really just looking for positive validation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the mark of really an intellectually honest person who is their primary concern is the end result and the product being as quality as possible. That their reaction to feedback is an indication of whether they're just looking for validation or if they want to produce the best possible thing. And
Yeah.
so, I'm sure you've encountered that too.
Yeah, but I don't think you can blame your kids for that, because I think kids it's quite normal for kids to do that, because you really have to learn how to interpret or how to handle criticism, any sort of it. I know, because when you would have criticized anything I had done, absolutely anything, before I turned 30 or above 30, I would have been furious and tried to, I don't know, debunk your points or whatever.
Right.
Now I just say, okay, yeah, might be a good point. If someone else sees something that I can't, yeah, tell me.
Yeah. I see. I'm trying to get my children to that point earlier just by being mean to them.
I admit it. You're just liking being mean to them.
they need
sometimes,
it. Sometimes adults are just, in this day and age, too nice to children. I think I like
too nice to everybody.
I like to put myself out there as the bulwark against that. I refer to it as okay buddy parenting, when a lot of parents, they will tell their child something that they know is going to be a disappointment or something that's difficult for the child to hear, and they will attempt to solicit buy-in immediately after saying it by saying, okay buddy, like we're at a party or we're at your friend's house and you're having fun, and you pull them aside and say, like, well, we're gonna have to listen, we're gonna have to leave in 10 minutes, okay buddy? And okay buddy is like one of those mind viruses that, like, once you hear somebody who says it frequently, you can't unhear it, and you realize like how frequently they're constantly soliciting approval from their children, which is like, to me, that's a no-go as a parent. But we're really getting into different conversation.
Oh, but I appreciate the wisdom. I might need it in the future.
The downside is that my children probably will hate me and not take care of me when I get old, but I guess that's worth it if it makes them more independent, more mature people.
Do you hate your parents?
Oh, the way that I interact with them, that's a whole different conversation. But
but what I mean by that is, I think we're both from the generation where, when we started acting up in the mall or when we were somewhere out to eat in the restaurant, it took about 12 seconds, and then Dad got up and picked me up and sat me in the car, and the whole thing was ended without me while I was waiting in the car. Okay, that's just a way to very, very quickly bring your point to your child.
Yeah, there was I remember hearing frequently when I was a child a saying that you don't hear very much these days, and it goes, "Children are meant to be seen and not heard." And I remember hearing that all the time when I was a kid. And most of the time, it's interesting these days how you notice when you go to like a social gathering, children are much more integrated into the social gathering than they used to be. When I was a kid, if you went to a family party or something like that, and there was like adults that knew each other and there were children that also knew each other, like at the very first and earliest opportunity, the children would disappear and find a different place where they could interact and just be entirely separate from the parents. And
that's why we had a children's table at every Easter.
It was only when someone was really out of line or somebody like had physically gotten hurt that you even thought of interacting with the adults, because you knew it was going to be a bad time anytime you interacted with the adults. So you just tried to like separate yourselves and avoid them as much as possible. These days, it's like the kids are, entertaining the parents and blah. It's just a whole different world, and in some ways for the better, and in some ways not.
Yeah, see, and that's why it's important that we make different kids.
Yeah, and we're mean to them as much as possible.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's probably a good place to end.
Yeah, I think so. So thanks for watching. Don't be mean to your children, at least not too mean.
At least in a constructive way.
In a constructive way, yeah. But in general, we need more toxicity, not less. Have a good one.
Bye.